I want to go ahead and get into the next story, which is about Russell Brand. Now, I don't know if you guys have been paying attention to this, but long story short, Russell Brand has been smeared. Surprise, surprise. One of the things I've been telling you guys is that anytime you start to tell the truth about the Democratic Party, people are either going to say that you're a conservative, a secret conservative. They'll say that you're an asset, a Russian asset. Anything except that you're part of the truth. Russell Brand's going through that. And I don't know if you guys have noticed this, but Russell Brand has now passed TYT in reference to subs. I think people really want to hear the truth. I think people are tired of hearing BS. And he has a lot of good takes. Like I've seen some of his videos from his podcasts. Hit that like button, guys. That really does help me with the algorithm. So I do want to play this video because he is finally responding to the people who have been smearing him, and rightfully so. So let me go ahead and share this. That's an interesting place for this to start. Here we go. I want to jam it with you. We're jamming. And I hope you like jamming too. We're jamming. It's not
the establishment and the mainstream media are coming for me and coming for this channel, saying I'm a conspiracy theorist, a right-wing nut, and an anti-vaxxer. If you don't think that I'm those things, and I don't think that I'm those things, could there be any other reason why the mainstream media and establishment want to shut down open discourse and dissent? Hello there, you 5.2 million awakening wonders. Glory unto thee. Let's stay awake. Let's stay focused. Let's stay conscious. Let's stay in the conversation. Obviously, today I'm talking to you about something personal. There's been a spate of articles about me saying I'm right wing, I'm a conspiracy theorist, I'm the new Joe Rogan. Quite like that one. Joe Rogan is a triumphant voice in a difficult space. I love Joe Rogan. I won't deny that. So what could be the reason behind it? The initial articles have been provoked by a video we did about Justin Trudeau saying that his invocation of the Emergency Act and refusal to rescind it entirely in case of certain financial components against peaceful trucker protests smacks of the kind of authoritarianism that might diminish his right to overtly condemn anti-democratic actions elsewhere. That's what we said. Is that a problem to you that I said that? Does that seem reasonable? I don't know. You know, we'll work it out. Comments below. Stay to the end of the video because there's a lot of complexity. Earlier in the history of this channel, we've been accused of being anti-vax simply for saying unvaccinated people might have rights. You know, that's been another thing. We talked about the Wuhan lab leak theory. Well, that seems to be an evolving situation too. We're going to get into it in depth. We're going to look at some of the accusations. What could be the reason behind it? The initial articles have been provoked by a video we did about Justin Trudeau saying that his invocation of the Emergency Act and refusal to rescind it entirely in case of certain financial components against peaceful trucker protests smacks of the kind of authoritarianism that might diminish his right to overtly condemn anti-democratic actions elsewhere. That's what we said. Is that a problem to you that I said that? Does that seem reasonable? I don't know. You know, we'll work it out. Comments below. Stay to the end of the video because there's a lot of complexity. Earlier in the history of this channel, we've been accused of being anti-vax simply for saying unvaccinated people might have rights. You know, that's been another thing. We talked about the Wuhan lab leak theory. Well, that seems to be an evolving situation too. We're going to get into it in depth. We're going to look at some of the accusations and the publications that have made those accusations to make sure that they're squeaky clean. But before that, I want to let you know that I'm on tour and I want you to come see me live across the UK. I'm in Newcastle, treated as criminals. So like the idea of misinformation, this is opinion. This is obviously my opinion. We check our sources. We never say anything that can't be backed up. And you'll be interested to know that in the many articles of criticism of this channel and what we do here, no one is able to say this thing. For example, let's just say the anti-vax thing. You know, like Russell Brand is anti-vax. I've never said that I'm anti-vax. What I've said is that perhaps people that are reluctant to become vaccinated shouldn't be treated as criminals, condemned, and treated as social pariahs. One reason being that there seems to be an enormous crossover with people that are poor, people that are from non-majority populations in the country, i.e. people from ethnic minorities. There seem to be a large number of unvaccinated people that have reason to be mistrustful of the government.
And why is that? Why is that? Maybe it has something to do with the history that has happened with African Americans. I can only speak for African Americans. What's happened with African Americans, how we've been experimented on medically, how they experimented on Black women, how they experimented on Black men, Tuskegee. Maybe that might have something to do with it. When you bring this up to people, they don't get it. They don't get it. So I just wanted to point that out, and I'll go back into the video.
Big corporations like Big Pharma. There seem to be a number of reasons to be cynical. In fact, a recent study published in some of the very publications that have leveled criticism at me recently revealed that Johnson & Johnson did a study that showed that natural immunity plus less vaccines than they originally suggested could be more effective than the number of vaccines they originally suggested. And remember, this is an ongoing situation, so who knows what permutations.
Right. So the problem is, even though Johnson & Johnson released that statement, the problem is, even if like someone like Russell Brand will repeat exactly what they said, people will still smear him. How is this even possible? Like literally, you can read the exact same statement and people will still smear him or anyone who's doing that. I'm going to fast forward a little bit here because I already know how YouTube is about this information. So let's go forward. Okay, here we go.
Warned that the ultimate investor may have strong links to the Saudi Arabian state, raising fears that a foreign government may have gained influence over the news direction of two major British publications. Around 60% of the Independent's revenue is derived from advertising, 15% encompasses new product development and digital services, including ad sales, data and technology support. You know, because we've done it before, that the mainstream media channels in the United States make a significant amount of their money from tracking your data, bundling your data, and selling your data. That's not contested. That's how the media operates. That's aside from their conventional funding through advertising models. So I think it's important, isn't it, that you understand where this information comes from. Major media corporations increasingly rely on a vast ecosystem of privacy violations, even as the public relies on them to report it. News sites' user tracking has only gotten more extreme. In 2020, a study published by Ghostery, a company that provides tools to block third-party data collection, found that news websites contain the most trackers globally, more than business, banking, entertainment, or even porn. So you're more likely to be tracked by looking at legacy media sites than you are if you looked at a porn site or an entertainment site. So how are you going to get honest, independent reporting from those guys? And it sort of makes sense, doesn't it, that they would be threatened by any other source of information, particularly if that source of information is open about our own fallibility, willing to be mutable and to change the conversation as new information comes available, no ties at all to giant business corporations, although I recognize we're on a big tech platform and we have an ad revenue model so that we can pay staff and run a business and it exists in the real world. That is something that we do. We're clear about that. We want to be part of an open conversation with you. We want to provide alternative narratives and not only provide the narratives, invite you to create the narratives with us. Because
yes, thank you so much for saying that. And I like the fact that he continued to say you. He was repeating the word you because YouTube is supposed to be about you. It's not supposed to be about MSNBC, CNN. Their narrative is supposed to be about you. It's supposed to represent you. But when you have all these restrictions and guidelines that you have to follow, They take bits and pieces away from you to fit the narrative that they wanted to fit. This is happening. So yes, it's supposed to be about you. Dude, imagine if all of us left tomorrow. Imagine if everybody on YouTube left tomorrow. YouTube wouldn't have a business. What? So if anything, they should be nicer to the content creators. Yeah, they should change their name. It's not about you anymore. It's what they want you to talk about. Facebook's the same way. Let's be real. So this is a problem. And you should be able to get that information. If you want to seek out alternative media, you should be privy to that information. And the fact that you have these sites like YouTube and you have these sites like Facebook that are just trying to tweak things and put in all these guidelines and restrictions, but then they're going to make exceptions for certain narratives that they want you to talk about, that tells you exactly what's going on. It's not so much the fact that you said these things. It's the fact that you said the things that they don't want you to say, that they don't want other people to hear. That's the problem. I'm going to go back into the video.
Do you know one thing I know? I don't know what's best. I've made a lot of mistakes. I've been wrong many times, but I'm beginning to think I'm right about this. The mainstream media is not your friend. The culture is not your friend. The government is not your friend. Big business is not your friend. They are operating collegiately in unison to create a set of systems that are beneficial to them and disadvantage you. The biggest threat to their power comes from unionization and mobilization of large groups of people. They're so nervous about it. They're so aggressive about it. They're so protective about it. It makes me think that they've got an agenda. The video that's got them all heated up and cross is one we made about Justin Trudeau and Justin Trudeau's introduction of emergency powers to shut down trucker protests, which were largely peaceful, which we said on this channel, that if you shut down peaceful protests, what you're essentially doing is trying to control dissent. Now, look at the next level. If someone points that out, you try to shut down that person. You've got to stamp it out like whack-a-mole, like the old woman that swallowed a fly. You've got to swallow a frog and an horse and a cat and a cow to just prevent the truth from getting out, that these people are not what they claim to be. They're not running fair liberal democracies. They use the aesthetic of fair liberal democracies. They look presentable and they say nice things about being respectful and loving to people from a variety of communities, as we absolutely must be if we're ever to build a decent and better world. But when you have a centralized state, centralized corporate control, centralized dominator culture media, we don't have the opportunity to build these communities.
And that's exactly what they want. That's exactly what they want. What he just said, we don't have the opportunity to build these communities if they continue to shut us down. If they continue to censor our message, getting out to the people, our voice, that limits our ability to build communities, to build a movement, to get the people to rise up. And I'm talking masses of people. They don't want that. He's right. They want people to fall in line. Same thing with politics. Why do you think they shun people who run on these like progressive messages, people who run, who say that they're socialists, hell, even democratic socialists? Why do you think they don't want those people to win? They don't want that message to get out. Now it's a little bit too late because, Bernie's campaign got that message out to people. And some people have moved further to the left since Bernie. I'm one of those people. I moved further to the left. So when his message was reaching a lot of people, which, by the way, that was not supposed to happen. What did they do? What did mainstream media do? They smeared him every chance they got. They did the same thing to revolutionary civil rights leaders. They did this to Malcolm X. They did it to Martin Luther King. This is what they do. They did it to the Black Panthers, or they'll send in infiltrators. You got to be careful about who you let join your group. I'm telling you for experience. Can't let everybody in. Not everybody who wants to help is really there to help. That's what they do. All the focus is on the money. And I'm glad he brought it back to the corporations, because that's what's running all of this. Not the politicians, it's the corporations. That's what it comes down to. I'll go back into the video.
All we pointed out is that Trudeau's introduction of emergency measures to shut down largely peaceful protests in Ottawa was at odds with the kind of democratic principles he was espousing when critiquing Russia's horrific actions in Ukraine. Let's note, for example, as Chrystia Freeland pointed out, that the aspect of the emergency measures that allows the Canadian government to freeze financial assets remains in place still. An advance on this argument is that in Canadian Parliament, they are now themselves investigating the introduction of those measures and whether or not it was anti-democratic. On Monday, a joint committee of Canada's Parliament officially launched an inquiry into the Trudeau government's actions against the Freedom Convoy civil liberties protesters. The unprecedented inquiry will look into allegations that the Trudeau government violated protesters' charters' rights when they arrested and detained them without charge, as well as the extreme actions of freezing bank accounts of protesters. Now, some of you might say, well, that is good, because that's an indication that there is democracy in Canada because they're investigating those actions. And I would agree, that is a good sign, isn't it? Because it's pretty bad that it happened, but at least there's being an investigation. But remember, then we have to look at, does the investigation lead to what? A revocation of those powers, someone being fined, a meaningful change in democracy, or does it become something that's a phatic exercise that's ultimately theatrical, don't change anything? We don't know that yet. I've got my suspicions. The committee is made up of several Liberal Party and down or mitigate it or back up power. Many feel that it's an abuse of power and that it should only be used in cases of true emergency, not to shut down speech. In another separate committee, MPs were warned by Assembly of First Nations National Chief Roseanne Archibald that the unprecedented decision to invoke the Emergencies Act had broad spectrum consequences. My concern is the act is a tool, and the tool itself can actually name and actually place labels upon people, Archibald said. The implications of the Emergencies Act are far and wide, and that is why I'm standing before you. I'm a former activist myself, and I've been involved in civil actions and charged. Now, obviously, as the chief of the First Nation people, Roseanne Archibald would be the very kind of person that Trudeau would be looking to form alliances with and would be looking to condemn, say, truckers. Oh, you truckers, remember what they said, they're racist, they're misogynists. Well, here is a female chief of the First Nation Assembly saying, I don't like these measures, because any right-thinking person does not want their freedom reduced or their ability to protest controlled or their money to be able to be frozen by the state, because the application of those measures will change according to the flavors of the day.
Bingo. When you start implementing those types of policies, where you start to determine what can be said, who can protest, how they can protest, where they can protest, it will change with the flavor of the day. It will depend on who's in power at that time, what agenda they want you to hear at that time, what narrative they want to get across to you at that time. So they'll always go back and tweak these rules and these policies. Somewhere along the way, I feel like we've seemed to have forgotten about freedom of speech, freedom of press. It doesn't even seem to apply anymore. And I think that's very problematic, but it's not just our country. As you hear, he's talking about what's happening in Canada. So it's not just in the United States. This is why this is so dangerous. It starts here and it spreads everywhere else. We're not the only ones having to deal with this. So I think that Russell Brand speaks a lot of truth. And also, you got to remember, I told you, he already passed TYT when it comes to subscribers. People don't like that. Some people do not like that at all. So he's reaching more people than they are. And his message is more radical. You know what? I'm going to get rid of that term radical. His message is further to the left. Hell, his message is more reasonable. How about we start doing that? Instead of saying that people are radical, I'm just going to start saying they're reasonable. I'm going to switch out those R's. They don't want people to hear that. So they're definitely going to smear. This is why they're attacking him. This is why he's being smeared. You don't see those same people trying to smear TYT, do you? Hardly. Hardly. They toe that line. They toe it just enough. I'll go back in.
A little while ago, you couldn't talk openly about so many aspects of the coronavirus pandemic. Increasingly, those protocols are altering, sometimes because new information is revealed, but sometimes it's because the attitudes have changed. And I believe that you should be able to have an open conversation and be wrong all of the time, because this is a democracy. I don't want to be told what I can say and what I can't say and be shut down and not have the ability to protest. Can't you see how it's closing in? They can shut down your bank account. They can stop you protesting. They can stop people on the internet saying, hey, what about this protesting being shut down? Why would you do that if you didn't have an agenda? And I'm sure many of the people that work at individual newspapers don't know that they're operating on behalf of that agenda. But as Chomsky famously said, if they didn't share that agenda, they wouldn't even have that job in the first place. Under Mr. Trudeau's decree, police had the authority to push back crowds on foot or with horses, use pepper spray.
Did everyone hear what he just said? If they didn't share that agenda, they wouldn't have that job in the first place. That's 100% true. I can tell you right now, I would never be allowed to host a show on CNN, MSNBC, NBC. They would never let me say the things that I say on this channel on those networks. Even if they gave me a script and I said I was going to stick to the script, then I went live, went off the cuff, just spoke really openly, that would have been the end of my job. They'll take you out. Yeah, so you're not going to be working with us anymore, and we thank you for your time. It would be over. It would be over. I remember them doing that to commentators too, who had different opinions about Obama. Cenk Uygur was one of those people. When Cenk Uygur used to work for MSNBC, he was one of those people that was starting to criticize Obama. They didn't like that. They're like, no, this is the liberal network. You have to be pro Obama. That's why he started TYT. They're a lot different now. Got one more part I want to play.
Enter trucks and other. There is good reason to suspect that undemocratic action took place in Canada. And that is all I said. And for that, I am labeled a conspiracy theorist, charged with being a right-wing person. I know some of you are right-wing people, and guess what? I don't mind what you believe in. I'm sure you believe stuff that I don't believe, and you know stuff I don't know. And perhaps together we will discover that we have more and more in common. And perhaps together we will start to realize that the mainstream media is not our friend, and that the government is not our friend, and that our culture is operating to keep us separated from one another. And we must continually look for opportunities to communicate openly and honestly, and become circumspect and indeed downright suspicious about the agenda of newspapers that call themselves The Independent, while they're owned, at least in significant part, by the Saudi Arabian state. Do your own research on how independent they're likely to be with that kind of alliance. But that's just what I think. What do you think? I might be wrong.
Bingo. He hit the nail on the head. Just like that. He just told you, you don't really have to agree with what he says. You can disagree with him. He can be wrong. You can be right. But we should be free to have the discussion. We can't even have the discussion without people smearing you. You heard what he just said about being called crazy right winger. People have said those things about me. They said Sabby is a secret conservative. I don't have anything to be secret about politically. No. So if I was conservative, I would just tell you that. That doesn't make any sense. People smeared me. They smeared those of us that were at RBN. All kinds of smears, especially on Twitter. That's why I ignore a lot of that stuff. It's crazy. We're not even allowed to have a difference of opinion with people anymore. What happened to just being able to have that type of discourse? We can't do that. You have to have the narrative they want you to have. It's ridiculous. And he's right. By them censoring people, by them smearing people, this is actually preventing people from coming together on the issues. And this is why I always tell you guys, stick to the issues. Always bring it back to the issues. When they try to smear you, they throw labels on you that may not be true. Take it right back to the issues. So for Russell Brand, I'm glad he said this. I'm glad he responded. He got the word out there. I mean, this is somebody that is using their voice in the platform that they have to tell people the other side of the story. And not a lot of people are doing that. He is risking a lot here, I would say. He's a celebrity. He's an actor. Hello. He may not get certain movie deals because of the things that he's saying on his show. But obviously, he thinks it's important to get that message out. So he's willing to take a risk. And not many people I've met are willing to do that. But he's right. This is what they want to do. They want to stop us from coming together. They want to keep us divided. I think there's one more part.
Want your comments. I want to learn from you. I'm not so arrogant as to believe that I know stuff you don't. I know you've suffered things that I don't understand. I'm not like the mainstream media that thinks they know better than you, that think you're dumb and stupid and your job is to sit down and obey. I believe you should have a voice. I believe you've got rights, and I believe the time is coming where we're going to need to express them. Hit me up in the comments below. What other stories would you like to see us communicate?
Pretty humble. Letting you know. What do you think? He wants to hear from you. How do you feel? I'm sorry, but it's just ridiculous. It's ridiculous. I hear more truth from Russell Brand than I do from CNN, MSNBC, Fox News.